Happy Friday, sixth graders, and happy May Day. It is May 1st, and we are picking up where we left off in Argentina. So hopefully yesterday you got your vocab and numbers 1 through 11 done on your reading guide, and you'll be finishing that up for Monday. So we left off with a pretty interesting tale about how the British decide to invade Spain because Napoleon was trying to take them over and they thought it would be a good time. And the people that live in Argentina, they decide that they are going to go against them. And they have a very capable commander named Delinier, who actually was originally French, beat them. And what ends up happening is that Argentina kind of has its own self-rule in a sense. They have people that are still technically of Spanish viceroyalty, but really they're governing themselves. And then we have that gentleman, Mariano Moreno, we talked about, who is a Creole lawyer who is trying to push for actual independence for Argentina. But he ends up dying, and he wasn't really a military guy anyway, so it didn't seem like much was going to come of it besides him writing things to try to incite people or to get them to actually come to action. But in 1812, that all changes. So we're going to go into today's lesson here with that. So we're going to be going into classwork, warm up for today. Asked you during the British invasion, what job did Santiago de Liniers have in Argentina? You can look that up. You'll be able to find it. And your exit ticket, we'll talk about that in a bit, but I would pay particular attention when we start talking about Jose de San Martin, what kind of a person he was. Okay, so in 1812, we have Jose de San Martin. He is going to come back to Argentina. He was originally born there in the 1770s. He's a Creole, right? And he's from one of the wealthier families in that area. And when he's young, he ends up going to military school and eventually becomes an officer, meaning someone who leads soldiers in the Spanish army. Now, he is going to actually fight Napoleon when he is invading Spain. And in the end, he ends up coming upon his mandatory retirement, or not mandatory. He can retire if he decides to. And even though he's in the middle of a war, he decides that he is going to retire from the Spanish military. Now, there are a lot of people that speculate as to why, and he said it's because I really felt like Argentina needed me. But in my personal opinion, I think he knew what was going on in Argentina, and he knew that there was a pretty good chance that he could get not only some wealth out of it, but he could become very, very famous. So he comes back and he starts to become a leader in Argentina because they had such a large revolutionary government there. Now, de San Martin knows that there are still a lot of Spanish royalist forces all over South America. And staying in Argentina is not going to be enough because we talked about it already. Argentina gets its wealth supplied from things that come in down the Rio de la Plata and get out into port. And the Spanish forces, particularly up here in Peru, are causing some serious issues. And they're thinking about making some incursions. They're fighting back against Bolivar very effectively. And de San Martin knows that in order for him to secure Argentinian independence and to hopefully make it as wealthy as he wants it to be, he needs the Spanish out of there. So he decides to embark on a campaign. And he knows that he needs to come up on Peru, and we'll talk about why that's tough in a second, but he needs to come up on them in a surprise. Okay, he knows that. Secondly, he knows that just the people from Buenos Aires in Argentina are not going to be enough. So he needs to recruit more people. And he does that by way of his insane amount of charisma and his skill on the military battlefield. People know who he is. He has a reputation. But not only that, when he speaks to people, they listen. They buy into what he's saying. Okay, once again, might sound kind of familiar to someone that we've already talked about not too long ago. Okay, so as he's starting to leave Argentina, he knows that his next place that he needs to end up, as we talked about, is Peru. But in order to do that, he's going to go to another colony, Chile, and try to get into Peru from this area. Okay, so as he leaves Argentina, he is going to try to cross the Andes Mountains. Okay, now the Andes Mountains are one of the biggest mountain ranges in the whole world. We talked about it in the beginning of the year. It's the same tectonic plate that creates the mountain ranges of the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Madres in Mexico. Okay, very, very rugged, tough mountains to traverse over, especially when you're thinking that you've got tens of thousands of soldiers, you've got thousands of mules, and you've got hundreds or even close to 2,000 horses, right? It's not an easy thing to do. And he needs to find a way to do it and to keep as many of his men alive as possible. So he ends up crossing over into Chile right around this area of where this mountain is. Now, the problem is that de San Martin spent a lot of time in Spain, and he didn't really know the geography of this place too well to cross at a point that would be enough to save his soldiers. So he hires a bunch of Native Americans, the Pehonche, to guide him over. And there's a problem, is the Pehonche know the Spanish. So they go and tell the Spanish right after they help them cross that de San Martin is coming. Okay? And that's perfect because that's exactly what de San Martin wanted them to do. He knew that they would double cross him. So he ends up going to another point entirely, and he attacks in the place that the Spanish least expect it. Now, it ends up going incredibly well, especially considering at one point he pretended to be sick, which also is going to help people think that he is going to delay his attack. But eventually it is successful, and he does end up freeing Chile. Now, he does lose half of his army in that cross, which is going to be a little bit difficult because when he tries to face Peru, it is going to end up being a huge issue for him. So he takes Chile, and he starts to move northward towards Peru. Now, this is where the biggest Spanish stronghold is. De San Martin knows it's going to be his biggest challenge. He and his troops have had some successes. They're starting to dwindle in numbers, but he still has his charisma. He still has his exceptional leadership abilities. He thinks that he can get it done. The problem is that he is vastly outnumbered, and even though Chile was a success, the Spanish in Peru had way too long to be able to have a counterattack to get more people to come in. They end up engaging. And unfortunately, it's not enough. Peru did declare its independence for a short time because Bolivar was there as well. But unfortunately, they can't meet together. They're both rising at the same time. They're not able to make a meeting. And eventually, when they're cut off from each other, the Spanish forces are able to knock them back, and they end up beating de San Martin pretty decisively. And unfortunately, at this time, kind of like with Napoleon, if you fail on a military campaign, in a lot of ways, you're seen as not a traitor, but you're seen as a failure. So San Martin was so devastated after this that he ends up going back to his farm, and he's planning on living the rest of his life very quietly. Unfortunately for him, by the time that he gets back to Argentina after fighting for about 10 years away from home, he finds out that his wife had died while he was away, and he had absolutely no idea. So that was a blow to him. And then on top of that, he also is refused a military pension, which means that he is not going to be getting any money in payment in his retirement from the countries that he had freed while he was away from Argentina. So eventually he ends up leaving South America altogether and lives in a few European countries until eventually he is going to die in the country of France when he's in his late 60s. It's a pretty sad tale, really. But once again, I mean, we have two guys doing pretty similar things, right? We have one coming from the north trying to unite all of these countries here, and we have one coming from the south trying to do basically the same thing. And I think you could argue Bolivar had a little bit more time of peacetime where he was an actual leader, which is why I think he gets a little bit more recognition. But I think their vision was both the same. And I think it would have been really interesting to see, had they both been able to drive the Spanish out completely together, what would have happened had they both have had their own little empires at the same time. I wonder if they would have come together in the end or if they would have fought each other. It would have been very interesting to see, but we'll never know. But ladies and gentlemen, just make sure that you get your reading guides done for Monday. Exit ticket. Remember, like I said, hopefully you were paying attention to some similarities between this guy and Bolivar. But I'm going to let you enjoy your weekend. Have a good one. Make good choices. And we will see you back here on Monday for a little intro to Brazil.